Another sacking in Saudi Arabia. Two more royals accused of corruption are fired at the behest of the Crown Prince. Is he cleaning up the kingdom or clearing out his rivals? I'm Ali Aslan, and today's newsmaker is Mohammed bin Salman. He's young, ambitious, and his critics say he'll stop at nothing to get what he wants. His supporters believe he's the reformer Saudi Arabia has been waiting for. And Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is clearly making a mark on the world stage. But has he achieved as much as he hoped he would? When he took the reins, he laid out a spectacular vision. He promised that by 2020, the kingdom would be able to live without oil. But things haven't exactly gone to plan. Oil exports have almost dried up, prices have crashed, the war next door is still raging, and the pandemic has crippled the economy. So, will MBS be forced to change course, and will he let anyone stand in his way? Adam Pletz reports.
He's the most powerful man in Saudi Arabia. The Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, or just MBS, has been the de facto ruler of the kingdom since 2017, when he quelled all opposition in a palace purge. He says it was necessary to fight corruption. He's wanted to cultivate an image of himself as a reformer, central to which is the Saudi Vision 2030. It aims to diversify the economy away from oil and gas. A key piece of the strategy is to build a new city, Neom, which its developers describe as an accelerator of human progress.
مشروع ليس مكان لأي مستثمر أو أي شركة تقليدية، هذا مشروع فقط موقع ومكان للحالمين الذين يريدون خلق شيء جديد في هذا العالم.
But as Saudi Arabia remains dependent on oil revenues, the dream may be more of a mirage in the desert. Currently, oil prices are at about half what the government needs to balance its payments. Hand in hand with Vision 2030, has been the introduction of social reforms. Women can now drive and travel alone without permission from male guardians. After 35 years, cinemas have been reopened and live music plays in cafes and restaurants. The reforms are doubtless groundbreaking for the traditionally ultra-conservative kingdom. But critics say the changes are cosmetic, and that MBS's silencing of his opponents paints a truer picture of the man and his intentions. On the international stage, MBS has cultivated strong ties with the Trump administration, but involvement in the Yemen War and its devastating humanitarian consequences have distanced the kingdom from US Democrats, as did the brutal murder of dissident Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the kingdom's Turkish embassy. That led even staunch Republicans to turn their backs on the king-to-be.
MBS, the Crown Prince, is a wrecking ball. I think he's complicit in the murder of Mr. Khashoggi to the highest level possible. I think the behavior before the Khashoggi murder was beyond disturbing, and I cannot see him being a reliable partner to the United States.
COVID-19 has further damaged the kingdom's image, with reports of African immigrant workers locked up to avoid them spreading the virus. MBS looks set to rule long into the future, enough time to reshape both his image and that of the kingdom. But who will the real man turn out to be? Liberal reformer or brutal autocrat? Adam Pletz, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, let's go to Houston now, where I am joined by Gregory Gause. He's the head of the International Affairs Department at the Bush School of Government and Public Service at Texas A&M University. He's also the author of numerous books on Saudi Arabia. Annelle Sheline joins us from Washington, D.C. She's a research fellow at the Quincy Institute, focusing on religious and political authority in the Middle East. And in Riyadh is Saudi and Gulf expert Mohammed al Qubaiban. Mohammed, pleasure to have you on the show. Let's focus on the two most recent sackings. Fahd bin Turki, the commander of Saudi troops in Yemen, and his son, a deputy governor in a region in Northwest, have been sacked officially because of corruption. What do you know about these sackings? Quincy Institute, focusing on religious and political authority in the Middle East. And in Riyadh is Saudi and Gulf expert Mohammed I'm not sure if Mohammed is hearing me. Doesn't seem to be the case. Gregory, the question then to you, what do you think, what do you make of these most recent sackings?
Well, I don't think we should see them in terms of a power struggle. I think that the Crown Prince has consolidated his power within the ruling family and within the government of Saudi Arabia. But things in Yemen are not going well. We certainly know that it's been 5 years now that the Saudi military has been engaged in the campaign in Yemen, and there hasn't been many successes after the first few months. Other than that, the details are not completely clear. And I think that in that sense, we're going to have to wait to see what comes out about the specifics. But I don't really see this in terms of a power struggle in the ruling family.
Do you think, Gregory, they could be also scapegoats, because at the end of the war, the war in Yemen is not going too well. You know, there's hardly any realistic chance for Saudi Arabia to actually display and present a winning face. Do you think that could be a theory?
It could be a theory, but I think that the most important thing to recognize about Yemen is that I think the Saudi government has been looking for an exit ramp from Yemen for some time. And I think that the problem with getting that exit ramp is that it's very difficult to put any pressure on the Houthis. The only outside power that the Houthis would listen to is Iran, and it would be very difficult for either Saudi Arabia or the United States to get the Iranians to put any kind of pressure on the Houthis to come to some kind of political settlement.
Mohammed, I think we have you back. Your quick assessment about the two most recent sackings of Fahd bin Turki and his son.
It's nice to meet you, Ali, and thanks for having me again. And let me clarify your questions. You're talking about removing General Fahad and his son. Is that your question about?
Exactly. Whether the allegations of corruption are indeed, if they hold true, or whether there's something more behind those. Gregory has also already said that he doesn't believe they are part of the power struggle.
Well, sir, what I think and what we've been watching, I came to the Saudi TVs for a couple of times. We really discussed this matter for some times. I thought that since the performance and the projects in Yemen itself, there is a lots of money being boost to Yemen for their projects, and lots of support from the Saudi government. And we still have the big complaint that things are not going smooth. And what I thought, it's not because of his military performance. I think what he was doing military performance, yes, there is some challenges. Maybe he was tight not to do more hard work due to any political reasons. But I thought that it's, as you said, it's a corruption. Due to the results, I mean, if you talk about, there is a lots of money being boosted to the soldiers in Yemen to be paid as a salaries. Lots of are complaining. Projects to be moved faster than it was supposed to be, since he's in charge. But regarding his son, honestly, sir, I don't have any idea, but I believe the decision made by the king that they are, both of them is, let's say, for reforming, firing them for reforming as regarding the corruptions.
Right. Well, one thing is for certain, Annelle, that the war in Yemen is very costly, and it comes at a very inopportune time. Obviously, COVID has affected Saudi Arabia, as it has all countries in the world. Saudi Arabia so far sees over 300,000 cases of COVID-19, and that has had a very detrimental effect, of course, on oil revenues. Oil revenues are way down, the main source of income for Saudi Arabia, and morale is quite low because taxes have been raised on their citizens for the very first time. What do you make of the current mood amongst the public, amongst the citizenry in Saudi Arabia?
I think in
if you're
general,
saying about
Saudis are feeling really frustrated about the fact that the VAT was tripled. It had been set at 5% in 2018 and was increased to 15% in July. Also, the cost of living stipend for employees of the state has been cut. And based on kind of what I'm hearing from friends in Saudi Arabia, there are increasing sort of rumblings of discontent against MBS. Initially there was so much excitement, especially from this young generation, many of whom had studied abroad and really saw MBS as representing their hopes and dreams. And he promised a lot, and in some ways set himself up to disappoint his people, unfortunately, given the extent to which he overpromised, and now obviously is dealing with the fallout from COVID and low oil prices. I mean, I think it was exciting. In the U.S. also there was a lot of excitement about the possibility that MBS would be this transformational leader, and so far it does appear largely cosmetic, and just reality is kind of getting in the way of his ambitions.
Certainly, Gregory, the COVID-19 certainly has been quite detrimental to MBS's very ambitious domestic and global ambitions that he is set forth. We've already heard about oil revenues being down. The Hajj pilgrimage is being suspended for most people for very good reasons, of course. And the futuristic city Neom, the proud project that he set forth, is also very much in danger due to falling revenues. That's quite a potent, vicious mix for MBS. We already said Annelle talking about his declining popularity amongst Saudi citizens.
So I think that one of the good things about Vision 2030 is that if you can get 1/3 of the goals that were set in it, Saudi Arabia is going to be in much better shape than it would otherwise. In some sense, the decline in oil prices from the COVID crisis has just accelerated what the Crown Prince's thoughts were about the declining economic influence of oil generally, and to some extent, COVID has just brought that day of reckoning closer. I think the problem with Vision 2030 is that the transformation that he envisaged required relatively high oil revenues to make it happen, and that's one of the problems with NEOM. But the good thing is that something like NEOM, as ambitious as it is, probably isn't as central to the transformation of the economy into a more private sector driven economy, and thus you can delay it, you can cut back on it. It might be a place where you could actually save money in the long run as the Saudis look to cut budgets.
Mohammed, Saudi citizens, I think it's fair to say, have been taken care of by the government in the sense now taxes are being raised on them for the very first time. Foreign workers have left Saudi Arabia in abundance. Is it fair to say what Annelle was saying, that perhaps pressure and the lack of satisfaction is mounting amongst the Saudi citizens, or would that be an overstatement?
Well, we all accepting this. I mean, if you look at other things, remember the Saudi government is still supporting their citizen. And if you're talking about school is still free, medication is still free. But regarding the tax, I am one of the who's supporting the tax to be increased up to 15%. Sir, you knew that we're having almost 15 million foreigners, laborers, and about 90% are laborers. They're not so highly education. So what I thought that will be, yes, it's a painful decisions regarding people, their salary is not good enough. But for the long term, I thought that the Saudi governments mitigate the problems by increasing the tax. And also, it's also good chances for the Saudi peoples to have the work. I mean, there is thousands of chances to work. And if the foreigner employers left, you are 60% almost as a youth. So it's not as the media are saying regarding about it. It's no. What the government did is the perfect thing, and it should be done a long time ago. We're not spoiled, but to me, there should be more painful decisions, and it should help the economic. Let me give you numbers. For 5%, the Saudi revenue is almost, I'll say it in Saudi riyals, is 150 billion Saudi riyals. Now, for 15%, this will be 450 billion Saudi riyals. That's almost 100 billion plus US dollar. I think it will be good for government, and it will, I maybe agree with Mr. Gregory when he talked about the new, we should not accelerate, or we should not go fast to reach it. And that's what the government are doing now. They are trying to balance things. There is a challenges. The pandemic did big consequences, problems.
Right.
Low prices in the oil, I think they did also, it has its consequences in the prices, but they are doing fine. There is some frustration. I'm not saying there is none frustration, but the majority understood the situation itself.
There is some frustration, says Mohammed. Annelle, that's domestically, but internationally, that could also hold true, doesn't it? Crown Prince MBS started 3 years ago with very high ambitions. His image was that of a young, dynamic reformer. He initiated many important social reforms. Women were allowed to drive. They were allowed to travel without being accompanied by males. Cinemas opened, live music in restaurants for the first time. That tide has turned a bit, hasn't it?
Well, and those all still hold true. I mean, I think it's important not to forget about all the ways in which he has implemented changes that are fundamentally, transformational for Saudi Arabia. But there's still a long way to go. In general, I think, right now Saudi Arabia is supposed to be hosting the G20 this November. Of course, it's sort of unclear how that's going to look under COVID conditions. But that was supposed to be another example of Saudi Arabia sort of taking this leadership role on the world stage. And obviously the murder of Khashoggi really tarnished his desired image as a sort of transformational leader. So moving forwards, I think, MBS would do well to try to find other ways to demonstrate that he is committed to moving Saudi Arabia towards taking a more sort of normal role on the world stage. As many young Saudis told me, they're just eager for their country to be a normal country. And so as Dr. Mohammed was saying, I think it probably is a good idea that, they are transitioning away from oil, starting to institute taxes. The question there will be whether people do start to demand more representation. As taxation goes up, we tend to see people ask for more of a say in what the government decisions are.
Gregory, the one country whose Saudi Arabia's relationship and MBS in particular is still very strong is the United States, of course. Donald Trump and particularly his son-in-law Jared Kushner seem to have excellent relationship with MBS. Now, of course, we have a U.S. election coming up in November. I think it's safe to say, is it safe to say that MBS is rooting for Donald Trump to win?
I think that's probably safe to say. I think one of the problems for Saudi Arabia going forward is that Saudi-U.S. relations has become, just like almost everything else in America these days, caught up in this political polarization that we see in the country. Historically, Saudi Arabia has never been that popular in the United States, but the person in the White House, whether a Democrat or a Republican, has always wanted to have good relations with Saudi Arabia. But given the very close embrace of President Trump to the Crown Prince, I think there are a lot of people in the Democratic Party, particularly in the younger elites of the Democratic Party, who question that kind of fundamental importance of a close U.S.-Saudi relationship. I'm not sure Joe Biden does. Biden is an old school politician, and I think he has in his mind a lot of the old school American foreign policy truths, if you will. But I think there's all sorts of people in the Democratic Party, younger than Joe Biden, who are less inclined to see Saudi Arabia as a vital American ally. And I think that that's going to be troublesome going forward if the Democrats win the next election.
Mohammed, another piece of international news that went all around the world lately was, of course, the UAE Israel deal, which has very concrete ramifications for your country as well. Many people even speculate that Saudi Arabia could be next in line to normalize relations with Israel. What's your take? What's your assessment?
Yesterday there was a speech for His Highness Prince, I think, Faisal bin Farhan, which is the Foreign Affairs, and he emphasized that the Saudi government and even the population itself will remain as what's been published, either the Arab League, let's say Arab League suggestions, or what's been resolutions from the United Nations. But regarding the Emirates and Israeli relationship, the GCC countries, it doesn't have to be as UAE went through it. They have their own reasons, but I didn't think so. That even though there is a lots of talk that maybe the Saudis will be next or Bahrain, no. Yesterday that was a clear cut from His Royal Highness that the relationship with the Palestine remain the same. It doesn't mean that there will be hostilities to the Israelis, and I'm not against that UAE made the relationship with the Israelis. It's their own choice and their options, and we're looking for more peace. What happened for the last 7 decades? We're only paid billions of money, and the Palestine themselves, they are in conflict themselves, and they did not solve their problems. I'm not here, trying to criticizing them, but this is the reality.
Right.
What we end up buying lots of weapons. Now the new threat is different. Not anymore the Israelis. The way I look at it is the Iranians are the most threat. So the UAE people, I thought they did the proper decision for more stability in the area.
And Annelle, certainly with the king having health problems and many of the internal rivals being either sacked or arrested, MBS is very young, he's 34 years old, so in theory he has a long reign ahead of him. And throughout his first 3 years, we've seen the reformer, young reformer, but we've also seen sides of him which point towards somewhat of an autocrat. We've seen the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, which you mentioned as well. Where do you think he will fall in line? Obviously, it's too soon to tell, but just judging by his first 3 years.
Well, I think the hope is that as he starts to gain greater experience and is able to have a clearer sense moving forward of what his country needs, the hope is that Vision 2030 will be successful, as Gregory Gause said. If he accomplishes just a third of those goals, it would be transformational for Saudi society, for the Saudi economy. For them to be able to get off of oil would be good, not only for their own economy, but for the rest of the world to use less fossil fuels. So I think it's hopeful that we have this coming leader who does seem very interested in his international image. And so moving forward, I do think, especially if Biden takes over in the United States, we might see, for example, MBS deciding to withdraw from Yemen, because that would be a clear signal to the Americans that the Saudis are listening to what U.S. Congress has said. For example, they want the Saudi conflict or the war in Yemen to end. And so we can only hope. Saudi Arabia is such an important regional player. We really just have to hope that using the guidance of other leaders in the region, like MBZ, for example, in the UAE, moving forward, we may see a greater regional security architecture, perhaps led by Saudi Arabia, especially as the U.S. starts to withdraw its military presence from the region. It's going to be important for Saudi Arabia to think about its role and the need for greater security and stability in the Persian Gulf.
Gregory, what do you think? Will MBS be able to gain back his image of a young, dynamic reformer, or will the killings of Khashoggi, the war in Yemen, all these have those tarnished his reputation already to an extent where it's irreversible? What do you think?
Nothing in politics is irreversible. I think that you can be both. You can be a social reformer and a political autocrat. And I think that there's a very strong sense that if you're going to make change in a country like Saudi Arabia, you have to consolidate power in your own hands. It's very clear that the Crown Prince believed that the way decisions were made before in Saudi Arabia, kind of committees of the ruling family where lots of people had vetoes, it just slowed things down. And he wants to bulldoze forward. Leaders who are ambitious at home tend to be ambitious abroad. But I think the bottom line is that Saudi Arabia doesn't have the material power or the ideological power to be the dominant force in the Middle East. It's going to have to play a balance of power game, and it's going to have to accommodate the United States going forward.
Gregory Gause, Annelle Sheline, and Mohammed al Qubaiban, thank you so much for your participation and your insights into current matters in Saudi Arabia. And thank you out there for watching, of course. I hope to see you again next time for a new edition of Newsmakers.